is here. Welcome to the first neighborhood task force meeting for the Choice Neighborhood Initiative. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I'm Eric Lashinsky, Chief of Comprehensive Planning for the City of Annapolis. I'm chairing this task force. I know most of you. Many of you don't know each other, so we're going to start with some introductions. But and we have folks from other city departments, and we have our planning team here, and folks from the Housing Authority, and then residents. So let me go ahead and share my screen, and we'll get this thing going. We're scheduled to go to 8 o'clock, and that's what I intend to do. What I'd like to do is let's see here. We're going to start with some introductions, get to know each other. Many of you may only have a cursory understanding of what this project is all about. I appreciate that you committed to being on the task force, and I'm curious to know why you chose yes, but we'll get into discussion later, and I think there's be some chance to kind of share your perspective on the neighborhood. But I want to give some background on what we've done so far and sort of how the city has approached neighborhood planning, and definitely reserve some time for discussion towards the end and talk about next steps. This is our first task force meeting, so I'm anticipating several more of these, and we can talk about the frequency of them. But we're gonna start sort of broad, and then we'll be getting into specifics with each meeting. So I guess I'll go ahead and start the introductions. Why don't we do city people first? I'll just kind of go through. Will, why don't you go ahead?
Good evening, everyone. As Eric prefaced, this is a really important part of this process, and I'm encouraged that you all are on this call. My name is William Rowell, for those who may not know me, and I work in the mayor's office, and I'm a colleague of Eric's. Thank you.
Thanks, Will. Let's see. We're going to have other people joining along the way. Kate, why don't you go ahead? You may be on mute still.
Sorry, guys, just having trouble with the a different laptop that I'm using tonight. Hi, I'm Kate Pettit. I'm Chief of Staff to Mayor Buckley. I'm new to the role.
We lost you towards the end, but I think we
got. Sorry, Eric.
No problem.
There we go. Yeah, I'm using a different laptop tonight, so everything's a little bit different. I apologize.
No problem.
So yeah, so new to the role. So learning about this project, and very sort of, very keen to participate in this conversation, because I think this is a really exciting and promising opportunity. So happy to do all I can to help contribute to the success of this project.
I'm glad you could join. Mitchell?
Hey, my apologies. I'm actually driving home. I'm Mitchell Stevenson, and I'm the Public Information Officer for the City of Annapolis. And for Choice Neighborhoods, so far I've been responsible for the communications effort, the website, and the newsletter you all received. So any feedback on that, you can send my way. Thanks.
Thanks, Mitchell. Archie?
Archie Trader, Director of Annapolis Recreation and Parks Department. Recreation affects the lives of all, so it's apropos that I be here. Thank you.
Thanks, Archie. Amy Miguez.
Hi, I'm Captain Amy Miguez with the Police Department, and I'm excited about this process.
Glad you could be here. Marcus?
Good evening, everyone. I'm Marcus Moore, City of Annapolis Department of Transportation Superintendent. I'm happy to be a part of this this team here. Thank you for inviting me, Eric.
You bet. And I just want to acknowledge that it's not an accident that many of these folks from different departments are on this task force. I mean, that was by design. It's really important that we have representatives from these different departments that have a role in the neighborhood. And so they're going to be regular contributors to this. I guess let's go ahead with Housing Authority staff that are here. I think I got all the city staff. Melissa, are you?
Yes, Melissa Maddox-Evans, Executive Director, HACA.
Great. Bridget?
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm Bridget McLaughlin, Director of Resident Services at HACA.
Bridget. Alex?
Good evening, Alex Weller, Capital Projects Manager.
And then I think that's it from HACA. And then EJP and Horde Copeland Mock. Why don't you go ahead, Ray?
Hi, my name is Ray Parks. I'm with EJP Consulting Group, and we're serving as the planning coordinator, supporting the city and the Housing Authority in the development of this plan.
Thanks. Maggie?
Hi, I'm Maggie Merrill, also with EJP, and really happy to be working with you guys.
Hey, this is Matthew Fitzsimmons. I'm an architect and planner with Horde Copeland Mock from the Maryland region. I'm happy to be collaborating with EJP and helping the City of Annapolis and HACA work through this Choice Neighborhood Initiative.
Thank you, Matthew. Yeah, we've been working with EJP and Horde Copeland Mock for some time, just kind of getting the project going. And so they're going to be a fixture here as well. Well, let's go through. I want to meet the folks on the task force from the neighborhood. I'll just go through on how they show up on my screen. Jane, why don't you go ahead?
Hi, I'm Jane Lawrence. I've been on the Board of Seeds for Success since we incorporated. We're now in about our 15th year of providing tutoring and mentoring to kids living in Eastport Terrace Harbor House. And along the way, I got really interested in HACA and learned a lot about the importance of redevelopment. And I couldn't be more excited to be on this task force.
Thank you, Jane. Yeah, I should say, when you introduce yourself, if you have a particular connection to the neighborhood besides being a resident, if you're involved with any organizations, be great to hear that as well. So Bill, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, hi, I'm Bill Reichard. I'm the president of the Eastport Civic Association, which is one of the largest and I would think one of the most active civic associations in the city. We have about 660 members, a very active board, and we are just delighted to be participating in this and lending our resources to help the discussion. Thanks.
Thank you, Bill. Mike?
Yeah, hi, my name is Mike LaFortune, and I'm the president of the Shearwater Condominiums Board of Directors. We're neighbors. We're just down the block from Harbor House, and we're real excited to learn about the plans and want to be good neighbors.
Good to meet you. Jess?
Hi, I'm Jess Packler. I have lived in Eastport since 1998, and I've lived on President Street since 1999. I love my neighborhood, and I am excited to learn more about this process and plans for the redevelopment. I am involved, other than just living right here on President Street in the neighborhood. I also have kids at Eastport, Annapolis Middle and Annapolis High, and I'm involved in all the PTAs of those. I run the Eastport Neighborhood Forum, and I am involved in a billion things, including currently planning for Eastport Arakan, which is in 2 days. So if my screen is off, that's why I'm here and I'm listening and I'm involved. But billion things going on. So
Thanks for making the time. Lovell?
How you doing? My name is Lavelle Offer, and
sorry about that.
I run a nonprofit called Small City Big Dreams. We operate out of this substation in Harbor House 1155 S4, and we help people get jobs. We send people to rehab, and we work with Miss Donna out the pantry. So we supply Harbor House with food, clothes, Pampers, milk, and other job resources and stuff like that.
Good to meet you. Glad you could be here. Agnes?
Sorry, yes. My name is Agnes Galvin. I'm a student at St. John's and I'm interning with Eric for the summer.
Glad you could be here. Amy Cruz?
Hey everybody, this is Amy Cruz. I'm sorry I'm driving, so I am going to keep my introduction brief and I will join by video around 7:15. I'm a resident and live on Wells Avenue. Great to be here.
Thanks, Amy. Diana?
Hi, my name is Diana. I am a mom of two esports students, and my mom's house is literally right around Oaxaca. And I also grew up on the 1000 Madison Street apartments for 13 years. So I'm just interested in seeing what this plan comes and what it has for my community.
So glad you could be here. Lisa?
Hi, everyone. Lisa DeLuna. Chris is not able to attend with me at the moment, but we live on President. We've lived here since 2019. We're the crazies that have 4 dogs that walk around the neighborhood. That's how I met Will and Amy. Hey, want to get involved. I want this community to be the best that it can be. And I think the only way that you can get involved is and help out is by getting involved. So that's why I'm here.
Good to meet you. Karen?
Hi, my name is Karen Jennings. My husband, Ted Weber, and I live at the corner of Park Avenue and President Street. And I'm also a past volunteer with Seeds for Success, and I've served on the Eastport Civic Association board in the past as well, and currently serve on the Annapolis Conservancy board. But we're excited and hopeful to see what can come out of this, and yeah, happy to be involved. So.
Thank you. Harry?
My name is Harry Lockley. I'm a public affairs officer at Fort Meade. I live over on Jefferson Street, walk my dogs every day, often by President Street, and I want to see what I can do to make our neighborhood a better place.
Cool. I'm glad you could be here. And I should have said this before. We are recording the meeting. We're going to make sure this is available to anybody who'd like to watch it later. I did get some messages from other people who expressed interest in being on the task force. They couldn't make it tonight, and they're going to be catching up on this later. Some are on vacation, some had conflicts. And I should also just say, I am also a neighborhood resident. I live on Van Buren Street, and I grew up there and moved back recently. And I am really grateful to be involved in this process as well. So I think I got everybody. I'm going to go ahead and just give a little bit of context to the project here so that we're all sort of on the same page, and I know some of you have different levels of knowledge of what this is all about. So I'll just keep it here. This is this is a grant-funded project. We got a big grant from U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development this past year. I think of it as somewhat of a coup for the city and for the housing authority. It was the housing authority that was the lead applicant in partnership with the city. It was a competitive process. We were one of 8 communities around the country that got this big grant to initiate the planning process for a comprehensive revitalization of our oldest and largest public housing community in the city. And EJP, feel free to jump in if I get any of this wrong, but we are now on essentially a 24-month timeline, but we have obligation under this grant to have a master plan vision in place within 12 months, which is essentially next June. And to get there, we have a process that has us doing a lot of due diligence and data collection and interviewing residents of Eastport Terrace and Harbor House Apartments and stakeholders in the neighborhood, understanding the context holistically. And once we have that, we dive into a visioning process, which is sort of, I guess that's where it gets fun and exciting, and we get to really put all of the opportunity ideas into some sort of plan that we can kind of discuss and refine and figure out how we're going to move forward towards implementation. You can kind of see the timeframes here. We did get a jump on things prior to meeting today. I believe we got the grant announcement towards the end of last year and have been just sort of getting our ducks in a row since then and getting organized. On the left, you can see we're part of a group of 3 task forces. This is a really important part of the HUD Choice Neighborhood Initiative process, where sort of a 3-legged stool. You have neighborhood, housing, and people. Those 3 groups each have their own task force or topics, I should say. The neighborhood one really should be made up of residents of the surrounding communities around Eastport Terrace and Harbor House, as well as city staff that are already engaged in the neighborhood. The housing task force has a lot of folks who have experience in affordable housing development. And then the people task force is current Eastport Terrace Harbor House residents and social service providers, including representatives from the school system and other organizations working in the neighborhood already. So the housing task force met last week. We're meeting tonight, and people task force will be getting going soon. Most of you expressed the ones I've spoken to about the task force expressed a willingness to participate, just knowing that there's some consequence to this and wanting to be engaged in it. I just wanted to be a little more specific about what we had in mind with this task force. As a participant, I like to think of it as it can be as much as you want it to be or as little as you want it. I mean, it's obviously something that you're doing on top of everything else you have going on in your life. So we're grateful for that. But it's really critical to help us vet the ideas for this project, come up with a vision that is sort of a consensus plan that a lot of people can get behind. I like to think of this task force as a cross-section of the community. So you bring different knowledge and expertise and experience living in the neighborhood that you can impart. You can identify resources and other partners for the project. Perhaps, some of you are part of organizations that could be a resource here. We certainly expect you to participate in the future meetings, and some of them will hopefully be in person, and we'll get to actually do things like this exercise in the picture here. Matthew and his firm and EJP do a lot of these sort of interactive planning exercises to really help us understand what's possible. And, I'm looking forward to that part. There's a time commitment, but, and we'll talk about future meetings towards the end, but I'm envisioning perhaps every 2 months we may meet. We could meet more frequently if there's an interest, but I want to be respectful of folks' time. And so this is broadly how the Department of Housing and Urban Development frames the role of neighborhood in this process. So in addition to creating new housing for the residents at Eastport Terrace and Harbor House, it's about, I'll just read it, creating the conditions necessary for public and private reinvestment in distressed neighborhoods to offer the kinds of amenities and assets, including safety, good schools, and commercial activity that are important to families' choices about their community. And so, there's 4 examples of what that might look like in terms of the types of investment, and then to be determined what this task force thinks should be the goals of this process is really important. But it's fundamentally, I would say, about reversing historic inequities in this community and really bringing the kind of investment that is needed to rectify that. So I think that's important to keep in mind as we move forward. And these are sort of, when I think about what we talk about when we talk about neighborhood, these are the kinds of investments that come to mind. Mobility is certainly more than bus service, but that's one aspect that that is an important part of many people's lives in the city, and including this neighborhood. Infrastructure is roads and power and water and all the things we often take for granted, but could be designed better within. President Street, I use it every day, and it can be hazardous during rush hour, as most of you all know. Could it be designed better? Perhaps. Public safety, we want to have the police involved, and they already are in this community, and we want to think outside the box on what strategies could make this a safer community. This is just an image of the Community Resource Center at the Robinwood community, but we have a similar one at Harbor House that Lavelle mentioned using. We have businesses in the community. I'll talk about the location of our project in a moment. This is on Monroe, but the Eastport Shopping Center is obviously right down the street. Open space opportunities, and then neighborhood housing. These are Habitat for Humanity houses on Tyler Avenue. I think there's a role for those types of organizations in this project to complement what happens on the Housing Authority site. I'm going to sort of run through some slides that, this is where I'm going to put my planning hat on and give you a sense of what we've done so far in understanding the context of the neighborhood. So we're not starting from scratch here, but this is the site of our project. It's not just the Housing Authority property. That's what we're showing in yellow here: Eastport Terrace and the Harbor House apartments, and Housing Authority offices is towards the back here. And you can see we are sort of identifying all of the kind of landmarks and assets in the community. This larger green area is our neighborhood study area. we have a line drawn around it. It's not a hard line, but for the purposes of applying for the grant, we had to identify a specific area that has a specific level of poverty and other metrics that made it a candidate for this type of investment. And we worked on several different boundaries, but this is the way it roughly aligns with the census block for this area. But so it doesn't mean that we're not talking about the things just outside of the green area, but at the end of the day, we're kind of focused on treating the neighborhood as within the green boundary here. When we made the pitch for this project to HUD, we really wanted to sell the assets that were already here that we're trying to leverage. Obviously, Truxton Park is a big one. All the investments that are made there, to the pool and tennis courts, and Pitt Moyer is a huge asset. We have transit line running right through the community, trails, a major bikeway along Hilltop. We have commercial asset in the Eastport Shopping Center, and business amenities there. We're in a food desert, meaning we don't have a grocery store real close by, but we do have this farm stand that opened up in recent years, and that might be something to talk about, food access. And then we have other government, public services. We have, school, walking distance, post office, fire station. We have churches, and this St. Luke's Nature Park, and under realized assets like Hawkins Cove and Rec Center. So the project is really in line with the comprehensive plan that we're working on as a city. And that's something that I've been working heavily on since I started here about 2 years ago. And I just wanted to share this slide to give you a sense of what is important in our comprehensive plan update that we do every 10 years. This one is going to be really different from the one we did in 2009 for a lot of obvious reasons. COVID, George Floyd, equity, awareness, climate change. These are sort of the flashpoints of our time that this comprehensive plan has to respond to. And so this is the structure that we've developed: the thriving city, the functional city, the adaptive city, and we're trying to address these core questions around equity, health, and resilience for all residents. And I think that this project that we're talking about tonight, it needs to hit all of these things to be successful. With our comprehensive plan, we're also really taking a pretty direct approach towards understanding the most vulnerable communities in the city. And we used the CDC's social vulnerability index to do that. On the bottom right, you can see when you apply that index of these criteria that I'm showing in the upper right, you can see where those blue areas show up across the country and the concentrations of those in the city. You can see where those darker blue areas are, and it aligns with a lot of what people might already understand if they live in Annapolis, but this kind of gives us a grounding for where there's need and where there's been historic lack of investment, and where we can focus that investment moving forward. And so I've just kind of highlighted our neighborhood study area here. Population trends, we're not the fastest growing part of the city, but we are growing. In the map on the left, you can see the darker blue area suggests that. And then on the right is an interesting map that really shows kind of a racial divide in our city, where the multicolored dots represent greater diversity racial background, and you can see how that works along the Forest Drive corridor. And the north, we have this sort of north-south divide in our city, and then within our study area, you have a pretty clear divide right along President Street, and that's interesting to keep in mind. I think this project can really address some of the citywide issues in a way this is kind of a microcosm of the city, I think. These are, I'm going to try to quickly explain these charts because they're hard to process when you see them for the first time, but they're really insightful. The one on the left is showing how we're gaining and losing population over the last 10 years. And you can see the 65 and older age bracket, similar to Anne Arundel County, which is the green, and the state of Maryland is orange. We're gaining a large number of residents in that age bracket. We're losing residents in the 45 to 54 range. We're losing them pretty significantly in the 25 to 34 range and in 18 to 24. And, it's hard not, when you see these kinds of statistics, it's hard not to think about how housing is impacting those changes, and that there may not be enough affordable housing for those age groups to locate here. And then similarly, when you look at family composition in Annapolis, we're gaining more non-family households and not so much of the family households. And that again may have to do with the sort of housing that is available here. So I'm kind of highlighting some of the data that we use to really make the narrative around the fact that we have a acute housing crisis in this city. The minimum sales price of a home in Annapolis is $625,000, which means that you need to be making around 140% of the area median income, which is around $105,000 for a family, just to afford that. And for rental, it's not as bad, but it's still, it's $2,000 a month on average, and you have to be making at least 80% of the area median income to afford that. And then cost burdened households, typically rule of thumb is you don't want to spend more than 30% of your monthly income on a rent or a mortgage. In this chart on the left, you can see the blue and the green show cost burdens for households in these different income ranges. So you could say even somebody making 80% to 120% of the area median income, which is, right in the average, 36.8% of those people are cost burdened, where they're paying more than 30% of their monthly income, but maybe less than 50% of their monthly income. And then the green is 18% of those folks are paying more than 50% of their income on their housing. And the one on the right is for rental. So you can see, this is pretty extreme. This people making 50% to 80% of the area median income, 63% of those folks are cost burdened in terms of their housing. And then this is sort of the last, just showing kind of the sales prices of the housing market in 2018 and 2019. It's just kind of consistent today, but you see that divide in the city, and that you see that divide within our microcosm of the city here, our study area. And so, when we talk about public safety, crime in the city, this is a map of violent crime. We have a similar map for property crime, but for folks who live in the city, this isn't going to surprise anybody, but it aligns with our social vulnerability map, which is the base here. We see a large concentration within our study area, and this is an opportunity to address that kind of holistically. So we want to be mindful of that. we also want to be mindful of the kind of public services that can come to address social issues in the neighborhood. I mean, we have some already in the community. We have a community center at Eastport Terrace. We have a community resource center that was set up. We have the fire station. Could there be more? Perhaps. So that's something to think about. The Eastport Elementary is just outside of our study area. This crazy map is showing parks in the city and really looking at the gaps that exist between those parks and sort of trying to understand the gaps in where people live that don't have access to parks. And so we're using that social vulnerability map as a background again, and we're basically organizing our parks into three types: mini parks, neighborhood playgrounds, and community playfields. Community playfields would be our largest parks: Truxton, Ellen Moyer, Bates Athletic Complex, Germantown, where it might be acceptable for somebody to have to go a mile to get to one of those larger parks. But for a mini park, the idea is that somebody should be just a short walk from a mini park. A quarter mile is what we typically refer to as a short walk, a 5-minute walk. And you see those yellow dotted radii around our mini parks, you can kind of start seeing the gaps. And in our study area, you see there's a gap. And this doesn't take into account recreation space that exists today at Eastport Terrace and Harbor House. It's just the city managed park spaces, but you can kind of see there's an opportunity for investment there in our recreational spaces. If you look at the gaps between these dotted lines. And then finally, the environmental context in Annapolis is complex. Many of us are familiar with the creeks of the city. We don't necessarily see the headwaters of those creeks very often, but all of these purple and green veins represent those most sensitive areas of the city. This is a requirement from the state in our comprehensive plan. And it really starts to show how many communities are touched by these sensitive natural resource areas that are defined by stream banks and steep slopes that are susceptible to erosion, and where our wetlands are. And you can also see the tree canopy across the city in these dotted green areas. But within our study area, we have Hawkins Cove and Truxton Park. And I want to say that Hawkins Cove is already a major focus here. Even prior to the project kicking off, this was identified as a high need investment. We have a underutilized open space. It's a gap in our water access network. It's a key connection to Truxton Park for residents of Eastport Terrace and Harbor House and neighbors around there. So we already have a project that's been underway here, and we're actually just put out an RFP for the design build contractor, and so that project is going to continue, and there'll be an opportunity for more community engagement on it. But HUD asks that these projects have a kind of action-oriented component. That while we're planning, we can also think about implementing projects that can kind of be a proof of concept for the redevelopment, and this is a really major candidate for that, since it's already been kind of vetted, and a lot of people have been involved with this already, and we're focusing on water access citywide right now. So this is something that's already happening, but will be coordinated with the larger project. So that was a lot of planning stuff. that hopefully gives you some better sense of, you know, what we're talking about when we talk about this neighborhood, and particularly from that kind of planning perspective. But this is now the time where I wanted to move into more of a discussion. Looks like it's 7:20. I think we're in pretty good shape on time. I'm going to switch over to something here. So right now, I mean, this is an opportunity to talk about really anything that's on people's minds, now that you kind of understand essentially where we're headed with this project. And we can also use this time to answer questions that people have. But I want people to feel encouraged to use the chat if, in addition to speaking up. And I guess the best way to do this is for people to use the raise their hand tool, and we can kind of.
Hey, Eric.
Yeah.
Jessica did have a question she put in the chat.
All right, let me figure out how to access the chat now from my screen here. Hold on a second here. Hold on.
So I can read it for you, Eric. It says,
I appreciate it.
Yeah, the demographic dot map that we saw earlier, is that based on the census? And is it reflective of owners or tenants?
That's a good question. It's reflective of the people who responded to the census. It is it's the 2020 census data, and it's reflective of the folks that responded to the census and where they live.
I was just asking Eric because it seemed to be somewhat skewed in terms of the Hispanic population from from the far out view, from what I know to be true in the neighborhood, particularly in the President Street area. But I know that in the census, a lot of people tend not to respond. So that could be why.
Yeah, that's a good observation. That may be the case. But yeah, I want to acknowledge that Teresa Wellman from our Department of Planning and Zoning looks like has joined, and she's our Chief of Community Development for the city. Thank you for being here, Teresa. I don't know, I may have missed some other folks that have joined, but I put these two questions on the screen. This is I'll be able to add comments, that people have, and with Post-it notes here. I wanted just to try to collect people's thoughts. I mean, I think it's important to be optimistic about this project and really think about what the potential is. But I think we're also here to talk about anything that's on people's minds that may be more of a concern, or where this project could go awry if we don't manage it well. And so that's something I want to address as well, if people are interested in. I saw there was a question about Hawkins Cove, the RFP. That I can certainly share with the group. That's public. We got a lot of people with hands up. I don't know who put them up first. I see Harry. Why don't you go ahead?
This is not my greatest fear, but I do have a concern. While the construction is going on, where will the current residents live?
Excellent question. I want to defer to somebody who has more experience with that. Ray or Teresa or Melissa.
Sure. I can't see anybody, so I will. So one of the things, first of all, I want to say there is no plan yet. We are in the beginning stages of developing a plan. And part of that work is understanding how the development plan and the implementation of that physical plan will get phased over time. We have an obligation to make sure that we are also talking about a companion relocation strategy. And that companion relocation strategy begins to work with residents to understand what is their specific relocation needs and how they get accommodated either temporarily while construction is going on, or in the case of the housing authority's goal, we have a desire to build first. So when we look at the site, we are looking at opportunities where there is less density on site, where we could start construction without anybody having to move, create new housing opportunities, and then move families there. So that's all part of this work that we will be developing in consultation with the housing authority, with residents. It will be based on land opportunities, etc. We are in the process of having household level surveys with families, and among the questions we're asking them is trying to get a sense about if the site were redeveloped, what would they be interested in? So we go from hypothetical now to more specific information about what percentage of folks might be interested in moving temporarily or permanently, et cetera, et cetera. But that will be part of the work that we develop together.
I think it's
Thank you,
important.
ma'am.
I think it's important to acknowledge, I should have said this earlier, that, I mean, I think within HUD's Choice Neighbor Initiative and the vision here is it's important to acknowledge that there's a right to return. You know, that's sort of fundamental to this redevelopment, that, you know, we're asking residents of the current communities to participate as well, with the understanding that they can envision the neighborhood they want to live in. And so that's really important to keep in mind here. Bill, why don't you go ahead?
Thanks. I guess just a couple of questions. The plan would contemplate an increase, significant increase in the number of units that currently exist. Is that correct? And if so, what's the projected percentage of increase, and how many units generally are you looking at in terms of building and redevelopment? Second question would be, have you identified potential developers, even at this stage, even at the planning stage? And if so, does it make sense to have some of the development interests actually participate in some of the planning task force right from the beginning?
So let me take the second question first, because yes, the Housing Authority will be putting out a competitive RFP to bring on a developer partner, and emphasis on competitive, and that will be a national search. And yes, there are developers who are currently serving on the housing task force, some of whom may very well be interested in eventually bidding on this. So yes to both of those. I'm forgetting your first question about the density. So
Yeah.
Under the Choice program, we, because we have to replace all of the existing units on a one-for-one basis, and the housing program requires mixed income. And when I say mixed income, I mean a combination of replacement units that are right now deeply affordable, plus net new workforce housing, plus unsubsidized units, market rate. Then we're talking about, if we want to compete for this future pot of money, which is about $50 million, that requires a doubling of the density, because there is a minimum math that we would have to hit under the rules of the Choice program. And so as we explore over the next several months how we would develop a housing plan, among the conversations we're having with the city and with private developers who may have land or development opportunities, is trying to understand, are there opportunities to bring in other possible sites into the mix? So this is, again, a longer conversation, and the housing task force is where many of those kinds of discussions are going to be had. So we hope you'll also come to those meetings as well, where we're trying to figure out, do we have land? Where is it? How is it? How can it come into the mix? Yes or no? Do we have other partners we can link up with? And what are those opportunities, what they could look like? Because that becomes part of the broader conversation for the housing strategy too.
Just to clarify, if I may, on that answer. So in essence, we double the density and enhance other resources to essentially be competitive once the plan is developed. So these task forces develop a plan together, and then that becomes competitive. There's no guarantee, there's no automatic implementation scenario. It's still dependent on all the factors that you cited. Is that correct? Is that?
Yes. The
Okay.
funds right now, that is at $50 million. That is not an automatic guarantee for that. So what we do during this planning process is to make sure when we get to the end of this planning process, there emerges a plan that, one, the city can adopt because it reflects community input and priorities, but two, it is ready to move to implementation. And the federal money is just one piece of the pie in terms of how it would get financed, but it's an important piece of the pie. And if we stay within the parameters, for example, the same neighborhood boundary, for example, there are certain points you get automatically, but the whole plan doesn't automatically get the $50 million, but you are hopefully in a good position to compete well nationally. Does that answer your question?
Thank you. Yes, it raises 6 more questions, but this is good. Thank you.
Let's we'll hope to get back to you. Karen, why don't you go ahead?
Oops, sorry. I was just gonna give my answers to these 2 questions. I don't know if that's appropriate or if that's what you wanted to do. But I was just gonna say my greatest hopes for the project is that it would revitalize the neighborhood and make it safer. And my greatest fears for the project, I'll let you finish typing that. My greatest fears are that they'll just contribute to rampant gentrification and lack of diversity in the city. So
thank you for breaking the ice on these questions.
Eric, while you're talking, can I ask you to clarify diversity? What kind of diversity are you speaking to, just for emphasis?
I guess socioeconomic diversity, also racial diversity, diversity also meaning like a mix of homeowners versus renters. So I see it as like multifaceted.
Great, thank you for clarifying.
Sure.
Thank you, Karen. Jane.
Well, I'd like to follow on with Karen with what my greatest hopes and fears are. My greatest hope is that we will really accept what this project is asking, is to be imaginative and to kind of think large. And for me, biggest thing we want to imagine is a more unified community that doesn't have a line down President Street. Some of the slides show there's definitely lines. So when I try to imagine what can break some of those lines, the first thing I think about is a really high quality daycare system that has a sliding scale for costs. So if you are below 30%, whatever that is, you're getting your daycare free, basically. You're being subsidized by people who can afford. Now, daycare is expensive, I get that. But that's the kind of icebreaker, if you want to say. I think if your children are going to a daycare together that could double as early childhood education, the really 5-star daycare centers are in effect early childhood centers. If your children are going together, you are in a bubble of shared interests and almost intimacy. And I think that's what I hope we would find in this project. Another idea would be there's oversubscription from kids of all socioeconomic levels to the county technical education things. Is there room to put in technical education that maybe would not just be for high school students, be for everyone? And again, if you're going to school with someone, maybe you're trying to have a new career at 40, and you're in school with someone who's 20, and you're from different sides of whatever you want to call it. That's a shared experience. My biggest fear is that I understand the density, I've gone to a lot of HACA meetings, read up on development. I understand why there's density. And my fear is that we won't be able to explain the benefits of density because we won't focus on everything that can ameliorate it. So my biggest fear is misinformation, lack of understanding what will come with that density. And I think that's probably the job of this task force, to understand that and put our shoulders into explaining it to people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because it is an issue that we struggle with here in the city, particularly in this area. Jess, thank you, Jane. Jess Packler.
Hi, so I'm gonna go on the answer the questions as well. My greatest hope for this project is revitalize the neighborhood. Like, I had a lot of the same thoughts as Karen. Revitalize the neighborhood, make it safer. I strongly subscribe to we are, part of a small urban, but an urban environment. And to make sure that, to really focus on that, and to, I hope that this project builds on our positives, and doesn't just focus on our negatives, right? I think there's a lot of time when we talk about the President Street area, there's a lot of the negatives are talked about often, and there are a lot of positives to our community. There's a reason my husband and I have lived here as long as we have. We lived here long before we owned here. There's a reason we chose to purchase here and raise our kids here. And the diversity of the neighborhood is a huge part of it, both socioeconomic, racial, the language diversity, the schools are a huge part of why we chose to live here. I know there's a lot of negative thoughts about the schools in the Eastport community, and I find them to be thoroughly incorrect in many aspects. And I love our schools. Though that is one thing I don't see anyone on here from the school system. So Eric, I think that's something, I'm on the Education Commission, so that's the city side of dealing with resources from the school. But I really think, either Jolynn Davis or somebody from our district cluster needs to be a part of this conversation if education is a part of it. Even though the city itself doesn't have anything to do with education, if we're going to discuss education, then ACPS needs to be a part of this conversation. And then,
I totally agree. I just want to add, I think they are going to be represented on the People Task Force. I'm not sure who from ACPS, but I think that was the intent there. It's not a problem to have somebody on this task force as well, though.
Yeah, I mean, I do think it would be important, to have that conversation. I mean, I can certainly speak to it from my experience and my role on the Education Commission. And then my greatest fear for this project is is there's a couple of fears. What Karen said, that it will contribute to the gentrification and the lack of the diversity, because we do have a great diversity, even if that isn't recognized, right? And what I don't want to see happen is that we lose our renters, our new immigrants, our our families are all around us that make Eastport what Eastport is, particularly this side of Eastport. It's a very unique, really cool group of humans. There are families that have lived, in the neighborhood for multiple generations. There are families that have only lived in the United States for a year, and everything in between. And I think, what I see happening in a lot of areas is, right, those families that have lived here for generations are sort of ignored in the conversations, right? And they are a really important part. A lot of them are middle and upper class African American families, and I don't want to see them get pushed out by everything that's going on. So I think that that's really important. And I also don't want to see anyone forced to leave by what's happening. And then my other part would be making sure that we, through this whole process, are stewards of the nature that surrounds us. Hawkins Cove is a beautiful, wild, amazing place. And beavers just came back to it after the after Spock Creek Conservancy's restoration of the streams. We're really seeing beavers and ospreys and all sorts of amazing animals come back into Hawkins Cove. And, it is a truly wild, I love Truxton Park, but, Truxton's a little bit more, it's a park, whereas Hawkins Cove is just a amazing little piece of wild stuck in the middle of, the city. And I would hate to see, us lose that or in any way degrade Spa Creek or that area. So that's my fears. Thank you.
Thanks, Jess. Let's see, Mike.
Okay, thank you. I think it's probably been said, so I'll just be brief. I think for hope, I really hope that this leads to a revitalization of the neighborhood. Someone said already about make it the neighborhood safer. I agree with that. I think our community would certainly want that to happen. And the fear, I think someone said as well, is I think especially the note about doubling the density is going to cause real fear to many people, that this will result in additional crime. And we already have a very large problem with crime in the current neighborhood. And so I think the fear is going to be, will we be able to, market it? Will be able to help people understand that that's not necessarily the case. But that's going to be a very tough hill for us to climb, I believe.
Yeah. When you think about, I think every time revitalization is mentioned, I'm kind of curious what comes to mind, aside from the safety aspect. Are there specific images that come to mind around revitalization? Mike?
I'm trying to think of it. I think in terms of images, for me, it would be park space, create an area where people are able to hopefully maybe even have the food desert taken care of by having some sort of local food option that's closer to the community, since Giant is so far away. I think it would be great to see maybe some sort of cultural center or activity take place that would help in the revitalization of the neighborhood, that would bring community together, bring people off of Boucher down President.
Thank you for getting into that. Lavelle.
I think we should try to bring more education to the lower income communities, because if we bring I forgot what the lady was saying about the daycares and stuff like that. that will help the people get jobs and stuff like that. You know what I mean? So they could afford to live better lives and stuff like that. Because a lot of the crime go on because of money issues. The people are poor.
That's true. That's very true.
And they lack the sources to make money and stuff like that. So if we could educate the lower income community, that would help out a lot of the problems that you have in the community.
That's a great point. You have any fears about this project?
That's the only thing that I fear that I see. I love all the park ideas and stuff like that. That's beautiful. But if we don't educate the people, like it's just gonna end up being the same thing over and over again. You see what I'm saying? Because they have redone other communities in Annapolis, and you still have problems with violence. And the violence comes from lack of education. So if we educate the people to make money so they can survive in the community, you will have less problems.
Eric, can I jump in and make a quick plug?
Yeah, of course.
So on Bridget McLaughlin's behalf, the People Task Force will be meeting, I believe, next week. And Lavelle, I'm so glad that you brought that up because that is going to be one of the central focuses of the People Plan. And so it's wonderful to hear these cross-cutting issues that are coming up because, as you guys know, who live in the neighborhood, you're affected by all of these issues at the same time. We have these individual task forces to look at housing and neighborhood and people, but they really all interact with each other. So please participate. Go on to the Eastport CNI website and get the information for next week's meeting. But anybody who's on this task force, you're welcome to participate in the People Task Force. And education, early childhood and school age education is a major focus of the People Plan. So
Eric, can I jump in really quick also?
Go for it.
I'll make it real quick. So I don't know if many of the other members of the task force know who Lavelle is, but he just graduated from Leadership Anne Arundel, and he also does a lot of community level work, and he places people into jobs and identifies people that have needs that need to be met. So I just wanted to throw that out there as an asset for not only this process, but if other people are doing work in the community, I think it all lends towards all of these task forces combining their efforts to make sure we're casting a wider net of assets and resources. And I think we all agree that the greatest resource is people, right? Are the people and minds that we can get involved in the process. So thank you, Eric.
Thanks for acknowledging that, Will. I was remiss in seeing some of these hands that went up. Amy, and then I'm going to get to Randy and Chanel. Go ahead, Amy.
Thank you. So I think just to tack on a little bit to something Jess said about concerned about not being forced to leave, people being forced to leave by anything we're doing here or anything in the city. I guess I also just want to add on to that we should be doing more to keep people here, especially people with low income, people who live in HACA properties, people who have lived here for a long time and might get forced out by some of what has already been named. So I think affirmatively doing something to allow them to stay, to buy, etc. But my hope is that this will help us address some gaps in opportunity and services and improve the quality of life for people who are living in our neighborhood, especially people who are living with low income. And so I'm thinking transportation and food deserts, which I know have already been mentioned. So that's my hope, is that it would address those gaps in opportunities for people who live very close to this part of Eastport. And then my fear is that the entire process my fear would be the entire process not being led by people who live in housing authority or centering those individuals. And by that, I mean, even in these spaces, I understand the task force, but even within the task force model, I think we should be following the expertise and advice and needs and that sort of thing of people who live in Haka property. And for those of you who haven't heard me say this before, part of where this comes from my heart, is that Haka didn't just happen. Haka exists because of a long history of displacement and forced removal and other policies that have created the need for us to have Haka. And so for that same reason, I think if this project is going to be framed as for people who live in public housing, then we should all be listening to the individuals who live in public housing, and then all of our thoughts and framing should be informed by that in all of these spaces. So my fear is that this process will not allow that as much as it should. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Randy, why don't you go ahead?
Hello, my name is Randy Rowell. I'm a resident of Eastport. My father was, my grandfather was, so we've got some decades there, generations after generation. But I'm also the chair of the City of Annapolis Environmental Commission. And one of the fears, one of the hopes I have, can y'all hear me okay?
You bet. You're good.
Okay, is that all of the workforce development aspects of the bids that are bidded out for all of the small scale construction, the dredging and all of that, other aspects will be bidded out with a special preference to minority owned businesses. And those Black or brown owned companies would be the ones who are allocated to do all of the workforce RFP aspects of all of the aspects of the project. My biggest fear is that that doesn't happen. With the grant, the $75,000 that was just got from Chesapeake Bay Trust, I recommended at the Environmental Matters meeting and also in our commission meeting, and I've been expressing this very openly, that we have this special opportunity to make a change and make a difference with how we conduct executive management as it relates to environmental restoration. And with that, we look. My biggest fear is that $75,000, which I was told by Jackie Guild, is going all towards all of the contractual work for this project, will go right into the same hands that it has continued to go into for the last, many, many years and decades. So one of my things that I really encourage is breaking up some of these long-lasting monopolies that have been withstanding throughout the downtown Annapolis and further Annapolis areas. And so this be an opportunity to take a very strong stance on environmental justice and on social, echoing what others have mentioned around social equity and things like that. So that would be my call on that.
Thank you, Randy. I agree. Chanel?
Yes. So my greatest.
Hey, why don't you introduce yourself first?
Hi. My name is Chanel Compton, and I'm the executive director for the Maryland Commission on African American History and Culture in the Banneker Douglas Museum. I was a little late to the call because I'm babysitting a 7 and 11-year-old, and they're wild. But I'm so happy to be here. I am going to start with my greatest fear for this project, and I'm really going to echo Amy's comment around centering the voices of HACA residents on all levels of planning. My fear is that residents are going to be more so pushed to the people planning committee rather than having their voices and experience centered, even in the development committee, because the way that the development committee has been framed is experts and people who are familiar with development will be on that committee. So I think that, so yeah, really just echoing all of Amy's points to that regard, centering HACA residents' voices is important on all levels of planning. My greatest hope for the project is that the residents are able to stay in Annapolis and come back after redevelopment. I don't know what the percentage is, but I know that the rent payment is a chronic problem. And so how that is being addressed throughout the planning of this project, I would think would be important, because that would determine whether or not they can come back, as well as if there's any planning or accommodation. I don't want to use the word accommodation, but if there's any infrastructure being placed so that residents can come back, right? And not just solely rely on, and forgive me if I don't have the right verbiage, but the first right of refusal, that's going to be critical.
Yes, I will. Okay, let's see. We're about 4 minutes to 8. I lost track of time. I was enjoying hearing what people were saying. I'm going to just kind of shift back now. We got some great comments here. I appreciate the candor.
I'm sorry, Eric, you said you lost track of what I was saying, or what?
No, I lost track of the time.
Okay.
We're almost 8 o'clock, and I apologize, but you know, I feel like everybody who wanted to say something had a chance, and you know, we're going to have future meetings. We'll have more opportunities to talk about and see how the project will be addressing these comments. But just, you know, my thoughts in sort of closing this meeting. First off, are people missing from this? It sounds like from some of the comments that there are people missing from this task force. And I would just ask you to reach out to me if you have specific people in mind, or you know, other thoughts on who should be part of this task force. If people have thoughts on frequency of meetings, I think unless people have strong opinion otherwise, I was thinking these would be every 2 months. I don't know if EJP and Matthew want to weigh in there, but I know we're trying to align the meetings with the work that's happening to sort of advance the project, so we have something to share to kind of show that we're addressing, you know, what's on people's mind. But that's sort of what I was thinking, and we will probably.
This is right. I would say I think you're not incorrect, and just for everybody's benefit, when Eric speaks about the work, a big piece of the work right now is the direct conversations with the public housing residents, because I really appreciated everybody's comments about centering the work around what the residents most immediately impacted by this have to say. So
we're losing you, Ray.
In the process right now of doing household level data gap. Residents have all been invited to participate. Folks may not come to a meeting today. It doesn't mean they're not on the task force, because, you know, everybody's busy and they have all kinds of other things. But residents are really
You're really breaking up. You're turning into a robot.
So Ray, you're kind of breaking up.
Yeah, we can't.
Nobody's physically present in today's meeting.
So Ray, I wanted to.
Now we can.
Hear part of it. Yeah, we could hear a part of it. But I wanted to propose, and this is something to throw out there. I do think it is a good opportunity to have a more frequent schedule initially, because I think it's important for us, if, you know, from what I'm hearing, it's important for us to try to get other and more diverse, you know, robust group of people to engage in this. And I think it'll provide an opportunity for us to do that, because others like Brandy and Chanel even, and others, and Lavelle can possibly spread the word to other community members. So I propose maybe the next one not be 2 months, but that's just my proposal. That way we can start getting people together to talk like this, you know, and kind of get to know each other.
Yeah.
If you don't mind, I'm so sorry. So this is just an idea to invite individuals from the People Planning Committee, if they're having a meeting next week, to participate in the other committees.
Yes, we have.
No, what I mean is people from this committee, like Eric, attend that meeting to formally invite people to really get the ball rolling. I think it's important to other committees interface with the residents, and being that Eric is a chair, that would probably be a good opportunity.
I can definitely do that, Chanel. That's a good idea.
I would like to say just one thing just about the entire collaborative process. And this, I think it's good to be able to establish this in the beginning. The way that our work is going to be most productive is that it's not the work of HACA or the city alone. This collaborative process is truly a collaborative process. So if there are people that need to be brought to the table and you would like to actually participate in this task force, what we're actually asking you is to bring them along with you and to inform us who we should invite, because we do a great deal of outreach with regards to all of these meetings and the information that's being provided. But we know that there are other people that certain people would be more inclined to feel comfortable listening to even, or coming with. So whether there are HACA residents or other business leaders or community leaders, we really are asking you to bring them along with you, and also inform us who they are so we can know who they are. And please don't assume that we may know everyone or that they have not been invited, because we've literally invited a few hundred people to participate in this experience. And so I just want to put that at the beginning, and that will enable us to be as comprehensive as possible in our outreach throughout this process. And so I invite anyone to attend the Housing Task Force, and anyone on our Housing Task Force can attend any other task force meeting. These task force meetings are interchangeable, and we can participate in any of them. Thank you.
And be paid. I'll throw that out there as well. This is a best practice in outreach and environmental restoration and things, especially during the midst of the worst economic disaster in the modern era. Maybe some of these funds that grants have awarded can be used as stipends or honorariums, or even to pay residents of HACA communities for focus groups where you are bringing them in and asking their input, right?
And
but
we
you
actually
also
are
throwing some cherry on the top by compensating them for their time. To ask people to give names and groups, and because these are valuable assets, right? Asking people to provide those and just as a free thing is a poor best practice in environmental restoration in Black communities.
Actually,
and that is what happens so often. So I would just really encourage trying to find funds to allocate to add to the value of the wealth of some of these underserved communities, as that is a best practice.
Right. We actually are doing that, and we are hiring residents now to be community connectors for this specific project, and will be, for other tasks as well. So you're actually very correct. And so that's why I think it's important for everyone to be as involved and knowledgeable as possible, because this is not just about inviting people to meetings. This is about transformation and economic development as we're doing the project.
And I want to add to that, Melissa, and Randy, good points both, because remembering that this is a learning process, and for everyone, even though we all have different things that we do and levels of expertise, I do think this process illustrates that we land where we are right now as it results to having these conversations about housing, because there hasn't been focus put on a lot of these areas. And so I think we're all in this space because we're looking for creative and innovative ways to do this best. So maybe collaborating, even Randy, connecting or, sending an email out to Melissa and just letting her know that, you can help with some of these things or some ideas that you might have, and even the consultants, because I think that's the cool thing about this space is we can all learn from each other and kind of further how we do the things that we do, because engagement is not easy. And not everybody knows, all of the best practices, but I do think this is a chance for all of us and all of our work to improve upon that. So I agree with everyone's comments.
Well, thank you, Will. I want to be respectful of people's time here. It's 8:06. The last two items, you can respond to me perhaps by email if you have strong opinion. There's an opportunity to have smaller committees as part of this neighborhood task force to address specific topics, whether it's transportation or environmental concerns or recreation. I think that's typically dependent on the desire of the participants, to have more focused conversations that we may not be able to have, but I could definitely take that up at the next meeting. But in the meantime, please send me a message if you have a strong opinion towards that. And these could be committees that meet between the larger meeting, more informally. And then finally, neighborhood survey. This is something that a few people have suggested. We are doing a very robust survey of the HACA residents, as some folks have said, and that's underway, and that's a really core component of this Choice Neighborhood Initiative. But we could do a survey, another survey for neighborhood residents. It would not be necessarily the same as what's going to HACA residents. It might touch on other topics, but that's another thought. And so perhaps you can send me a message about that as well if you have an opinion. But I think that's another way to reach more people in the neighborhood who may not be participating on this task force. So that's just something on my mind. Any other comments? Things people wanted to say and haven't? All right.
Diana, I wanted to share of maybe can we talk to like the police department or the we can.
I'm losing you, Diana. I lost you at when you said police. I didn't hear anything after that.
Talk, get an idea of what.
Shoot. I'm not hearing. We're not hearing anything. I may have to follow up with you afterwards. I mean, it sounds like you want to have a discussion with Annapolis Police, but shoot. Well, I will follow up with you, Diane, after this, and try to get a better sense of what's on your mind. And I'm sure we can address it. Anyhow, I really, hello?
I was going to say, I put in the chat a link to a website for the Jal Bhagirathi Foundation when I was in India. They did a lot of this work that we're doing and trying to do, and they have a great blueprint there with their 4-tier approach to building, creating capacity and communities of color around environmental restoration and solving environmental issues. So it'd be good to take a look at it and see how they approached it by creating the Water Resource Council and things like that, different communities of practice.
All right.
Yeah.
Check that out. I see it. I'm just catching up on the chat right now, but we'll plan to meet monthly. I appreciate that comment, and I'm happy to do that. And so I'll be reaching out to everybody, find a next date. I'll probably propose something and see if it works for everybody. I know people's schedules can be difficult during the summer, but I really appreciate everybody that was able to make it tonight. Across the board, I appreciate the candor, and I look forward to advancing this process. So thank you again, and just definitely keep in mind other people that you'd like to have involved here, and we'll broaden the group as needed. So thank you all again. Have a good night.
Thanks, Eric.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Eric. And thank all of you all.
I just want to also say we're going to be posting the video of this on the city's YouTube City TV account, which is where we archive all of our public meetings. And so we'll be able to share that. And I know some notes were taken, and I believe we're going to be posting those to the project website, which is eastportcni.org, right?